Lisa A. Smith, certified plant-based nutritionist, founder of the Black Health Academy, and creator of the signature program Farm to Table, which is a 10-week plant-based nutrition coaching program. So I am so excited to be here with you today on behalf of the Afro-Vegan Society and the Black Health Academy to tell you 5 reasons you absolutely must dump dairy now. It is so critical that you do everything in your power to make the transition to a whole food plant-based lifestyle. And of course, eliminating dairy is one of the key ways to begin to do that. So I'm excited to deep dive into this presentation with you. Again, I'm Lisa A. Smith, founder of the Black Health Academy. You can find out more about me and the Academy and the programs I offer at www.theblackhealthacademy.com. Let's get into it. So listen, here's the tea, okay? The fact of the matter is no one actually wants to give up dairy. Let's be honest, right? We want to feel our best. We want to be at an ideal, healthy weight. We want to be free of chronic health challenges. But do we really want to give up yogurt, dairy, and cheese? No, not really, right? However, unfortunately, we absolutely must in order to reach a level of optimal health. So it's less of I want to give up dairy and more of I want to be my best self. I want to be the version of myself that can thrive, wake up every day with loads of energy, feel great in my body, be free of brain fog, be free of mental and health challenges. And so giving up dairy is a surefire way to do that. So here's the deal, okay? When I began to make the transition to a whole food plant-based diet, I didn't want to give up dairy, but when I did, I simply could not ignore the vast differences in my body and my health. So going dairy-free for me and many of our students in our community at Farm to Table and the Black Health Academy, it's meant that the bloating is gone away, clearer skin, no runny nose or congestion, no colds or allergies, no more unbearable cramps that time of the month, right? And so giving up dairy, it was impossible to ignore all of the benefits that I felt and that I experienced as a result of doing so. And of course, I was then incentivized to continue on this plant-based, dairy-free lifestyle. So let's dig into the 5 reasons why you absolutely must dump dairy now. The first, and I think arguably one of the most important reasons, is because dairy causes a compromised immunity, right? Dairy is what we call an immunosuppressant. It lacks adequate nutrition, it inflames the body, and it creates so much mucus in the body that what it essentially does is handicaps our immune system from being able to create the antibodies that are required to protect us from pathogens and chronic health challenges. So our bodies are so sophisticated. We are like a walking chemistry lab, and our body really has the ability to heal us from the inside out. However, there are certain things that we can eat. There are certain behaviors that we can partake in. There are certain lifestyles that we can live that will suppress our immune system. And dairy is certainly one of those things. So consuming dairy on a regular basis will compromise your immune system because of the excess mucus that it creates in the body. Now, mucus is not necessarily a bad thing. We actually need some mucus, but it's the excess production of it that can become highly problematic. So dairy, along with refined and concentrated sweeteners, is certainly one of the top causes of inflammation in the body. And this is really key because over 60% of our immune system is in our gut. It's in our digestive system. And so having our immune system there, consuming dairy that's creating this excess mucus really creates an acidic environment in that gut. And so whereby lending our immune system to be compromised. So really problematic with regard to being healthy, not necessarily having to take drugs and things to get over health challenges. Your body has the ability to escort you into healing, but we have to give it the raw materials required to do that and take away the things that disallows it to do that. And one of those is dairy. The second reason that we absolutely must dump dairy now is because dairy is one of the leading causes of bloating and acne. Now, I experienced this firsthand. I personally had, a wonderful weight loss journey myself. I used to be 65 pounds overweight. And I remember on my own personal weight loss journey, I was losing weight, but I couldn't get rid of my infamous belly. Like my belly wouldn't get as flat. It definitely went down some with the weight loss, but I was not seeing the results I wanted to see in my midsection. And I had no idea at the time that it had everything to do with my diet, right? And so I was actually, still consuming dairy because I lost my weight before becoming a plant-based vegan. And, that my belly just wouldn't get flat. But when I let go of that yogurt and those parfaits, and that ice cream and that butter and that cheese, my belly then flattened out because, sometimes we think we are overweight, but we could be chronically bloated and chronically inflamed because we're having a, low grade inflammatory response to something that we're consuming consistently, right? So a lot of times it's not until you remove the thing from the diet that you see that it was having an adverse effect on the body. And that is essentially what was the case with me and many of our students. And then also acne. Listen, we know that, we can get really, really insecure about bad skin. It can really take a toll on our self-esteem and our confidence. And, for me, I've heard people talk about the vegan glow, right? And I really was able to experience that once I really cleaned up my diet. Getting rid of the dairy was essential because it allowed my skin to thrive. Our skin is the largest organ on our body. And, oftentimes it is the last place to get nutrients because our body is going to prioritize all our other organs before distributing nutrients to the skin. And so a lot of times we use external and topical products to treat the skin, but treating it from an internal standpoint, it's all about eating the foods that is going to lend to healthy skin, and getting rid of the dairy is going to help that exponentially. All right. The next reason that we absolutely must give up dairy is because dairy is species specific. Every mammal makes breast milk for its young. And we as humans should only be consuming the breast milk of our species, meaning, when our mom was pregnant with us, more than likely her breast produced milk. And that was the food that Mother Nature intended for us to consume as infants. All cows, pigs, dogs, cats, they all produce milk when they're impregnated because that's what Mother Nature intended, for them to be able to feed their own baby, their own species. So we should only be consuming milk that comes from our species. So we should not be going to another mammal for its breast milk. And this is really, really important because our bodies as women is so sophisticated that as the baby ages, our breast milk begins to change chemically to be in line with the age of that baby. So if you're breastfeeding, the milk that your baby gets from your breast, let's say at 6 months, it's not the same that it gets at 8 months. It's not the same that it got in 2 months, right? And so our bodies are really sophisticated in that, they're designed to be in line with the growth of our young. And so that's why it's so important to get breast milk from your own species, because if we try and do formula, or if we try and feed our child with milk from another species breast or teat, that milk and chemically has not adjusted to the growth and the development of our baby. When a human baby is born, it's maybe between, 5, 7, 9, 10 pounds. Whereas when a calf is born, it's literally roughly about 90 pounds, grows up to be hundreds of pounds. It's a bovine animal with 4 stomachs. Very, very, very different species, very, very different stages of growth and development. So we should be feeding our children with the breast milk that Mother Nature intended for the growth of that specific species. Very important. All right. So listen, next reason that we must absolutely dump dairy now is that milk is reserved for infancy only. So kind of piggybacking off the last reason here. a lot of times as we grow older, as we age, especially as people of color, we continue to consume dairy, and most people of color are what we consider to be lactose intolerant. More people of color are lactose intolerant than some other demographics. And what we find is that, a lot of times, if we're not enlightened about these things, once the baby stops consuming breast milk, we'll oftentimes move them over to cow's milk as they get older. But the fact of the matter is, the enzyme that's required to digest lactose is called lactase. And over 90% of that lactase is gone out of our bodies by the age of 4. And so we don't even require the enzyme required we don't even have the enzyme required to digest lactose as we age. When our mother's breast stopped producing milk, we were done with milk. That's what Mother Nature intended. Mother Nature never intended for us to move from our mother's breast to the cow's breast. We were always meant to consume milk in infancy only infancy. And then as we get older, we transition to more harder, firmer table foods, but we should not be transitioning over to cow's milk. Okay. So we don't have the enzyme required to digest it. And lactose is the milk sugar. Anytime a word ends in OSE, it's a sugar. And so lactose is the milk sugar. So we can't process it. So when someone says I'm lactose intolerant, that's exactly what they're speaking to is, my body has an adverse response to this milk sugar because I don't have the enzyme to digest it. Now, there are people who don't identify as lactose tolerant. They also do not have the enzyme required to digest the dairy, but they've either, built up a tolerance for it, right? Or their response is such a low-grade inflammatory response that it doesn't necessarily disrupt their life and they're not really conscious of it. So one of the best ways to become conscious of it is to completely remove it from your diet. And you'll find if you slip up or reintroduce it, because a lot of us yo-yo as we're trying to give up that dairy, you'll feel the effects of that dairy on the body, okay? So milk is reserved for infancy only. Mom stopped producing milk, breast milk. We are done with milk. We should not be moving on to another species. Okay, one more. So another reason why we absolutely must dump the dairy now is increased inflammation and mucus promotes chronic disease. And so what happens when we consume a lot of dairy is, again, that inflammatory response in the body. One of the top causes of inflammation in the body is dairy, but then also increased mucus. Remember earlier I said we need mucus, but we don't need excess amounts. That becomes problematic. It's just like with any other substance, like we need iron, but excess amounts can be bad for us. We need water, but there is a such thing as drinking too much water. So this is the same case here. There is a such thing as producing too much mucus. And so what happens is when we consume a lot of animal products and a lot of dairy, it creates an acidic environment in the body. And in acidic environments is where disease thrives in the body. Disease thrives in acidic environments. So the body loves to be at a pH of about 7.4, loves to have a pH balance of about 7.4. But when we have high amounts of animal products, specifically dairy in our diet, that pH balance is lowered and we typically become more acidic than we are alkaline. Now, there is a such thing as being too alkaline too, absolutely. That's why it's called pH balance. The pH scale goes all the way up to 14, but the blood only wants to be about a 7.4. And so this is really important to help us maintain the proper balance between acidity and alkalinity by eliminating that dairy, because again, the more acidic we are, the more likely that chronic disease has an environment in which to grow and thrive. And so we want the body to be as alkaline as possible. And we know inflammatory markers are typically a sign of whether or not you're a candidate for chronic disease, right? How inflamed is the body? So we want to definitely eliminate inflammation, definitely eliminate the production of that excess mucus, and definitely maintain a healthy pH balance, a healthy pH balance. So at this point, you're probably like, look, Lisa, I hear you. I hear you. You've laid out a pretty fairly good argument of why dairy isn't good for me, but it is so good. It is so good, right? Well, I hear you. You know, my students think the exact same way. I used to think the exact same way. And here's the good news. It's not all your fault. Here's a super fun fact. There is a product that's produced when you consume cheese specifically that's called casomorphin. So casomorphin is produced in a digestive system as the body is attempting to break down cheese. And this casomorphin is produced from a milk protein that's called casein. Now, most of you have probably heard of whey, W-H-E-Y. That's, you know, one the most popular milk or dairy protein, but casein is the second. And when we consume cheese, we release an opiate-like quality called casomorphin, and this casomorphin is highly addictive. And so, you know, it's certainly not as strong as a street drug opiate, but we are getting that opiate-like response from the body that makes cheese highly, highly addictive. So a lot of times people will say, I can give up the milk, I can give up the butter, I can give up the ice cream, but that cheese, and I completely understand, cheese is super addictive. But I wanted you to understand biologically why it's not just your fault. You are actually having a biochemical response to this substance, right? And that's also why it's important that when you do make the transition away from dairy, that you give it up completely, because still keeping a little bit in the diet is going to trigger that addictive response in the body and in the brain. You're going to get those endorphin hits and you're going to want more and more. So the only way to give up an addiction is abstinence, not, you know, a little bit every now and then or just reducing it to a certain amount. But in order to completely get rid of the biochemical dependency, we have to get rid of the substance. Okay. So it's not all your fault, but that's why it's so important to stay completely away. All right, so here's 2 pro tips I want to leave you with about dairy, because when you think of dairy, you probably totally think about, you know, the obvious stuff, the yogurt, the ice cream, the coffee creamer, the sour cream, the butter, the cheese. You probably think about all of the obvious things, but here's a pro tip. Dairy is not always obvious. You must always read the ingredients, because dairy can be found in some of the most unassuming products. These are things like bread and crackers and salad dressings and even potato chips, right? And when I say salad dressings, I'm not just talking about like your ranch and your blue cheese. I mean like vinaigrettes and things that you believe wouldn't contain dairy, right? I've seen dairy in Italian dressings. So it's really important to question everything, because as you're trying to remove this, you know, from your diet, you think you've done the heavy lifting by getting rid of the cheese and the butter, but you could still be consuming some processed or packaged foods that are also made with dairy. And remember that we're reading those ingredients, and because dairy is considered an allergen, it'll often be listed in bold print at the bottom of the ingredient list that this contains milk or this contains dairy, because it's such a huge allergen in our world. And so it's really important to read those ingredients and look for that print. And if that print isn't there in the ingredients, it might not say milk, it might say whey, or it might say casein, you know, so it might say lactose. So you want to be very careful and understand all the words that apply to dairy, or it may contain some type of cheese. So it's not always obvious, so make sure you read the ingredients on everything. And my final pro tip for you today is this. We got options, okay? So number 1, we got options. And number 2, dairy-free does not always equal healthy. So here's the deal. Everything that typically contains dairy, there is now a dairy-free version of it. Your butter, your milk, your ice cream, you know, your salad dressings. You can find dairy-free versions of all of these products. However, the caveat to that is this. Dairy-free doesn't always mean exceptionally healthy or optimally healthy. Does it make it healthier just because it doesn't contain dairy? Absolutely. Something being dairy-free makes it healthier. However, depending on where you are in your health journey, you may need to account for a few other things. So prime example here would be dairy-free ice cream. You can get dairy-free ice cream and it lacks the dairy, but it still may contain a high amount of sugar, just like dairy-free yogurt. It's no dairy, but it's high sugar. Or it can still contain colorants and food dyes and preservatives. So don't think just like, vegan doesn't always equal healthy, dairy-free doesn't always equal healthy. Is it a better option? Absolutely. And you can use these dairy-free processed products in your transition, but you also want to make sure you're educated on how to read those labels. Make sure you understand the importance of not just eliminating dairy, but eliminating, processed chemical laden foods with a bunch of food dyes and preservatives. That's just as important. So dairy free is not the only thing we're looking for on the front of these packages. Make sure you dig a little deeper into those ingredients. Listen, I hope this was helpful for you today. I hope you're motivated to go out and dump the dairy. Listen, there are a wealth of other presentations, from Afro-Vegan Society that will help you do that and really take advantage of those, because it's exceptionally important that, especially as people of color, we work really, really hard to eliminate this food or animal products, but especially dairy, from the diet to give ourselves and our children the best shot at optimal health. I'm Lisa A. Smith, founder of the Black Health Academy and of the Farm to Table plant-based coaching program. I look forward to you having abundance of success on your dairy-free journey. Take care.